Okay, so today I was really excited because the assignment said, let's walk through this challenge together. But we just did that this morning. We walked through together. So I'll just lecture and go through really quick through this mute button example. I have it pulled out. So before we do the example, let's go over the main concepts of the day, which is props and state. So state has to be one central location of truth in your app. Do not put state in more than one component. State must stay in one component. You can make it a function if you want to be new and learn the function thing. As you saw with Quinn, how it's been in the last few years is you only use functions for stateless components. They're just displaying things, and the class-based components have the brains and the remembering of state. But you only want one component with state. If you have a child component that has its own state, it will become rebellious and unpredictable, and you don't want that. So props.
So which component should have state?
The grandparent one component, app. App will have state, and everything else will not. And the only way they'll know about the state is what little part of the state that pertains to them. What part of the state should I pay attention to? Do I need to change in reaction to? That's where props come in. Props you pass down from the parent to the child all the way down to the grandchild. It can become kind of a pain to pass things down through many layers, but that's fine. That's how the magic of React works. It only updates what needs to update, and you tell it what needs to update with props. Okay. So we're gonna go to, let's see what's in here first. So the README says, we just created this React app, and there's some files already in the repository that we need to drag into our app, including these two. Sure. I think I just replaced the automatically generated get ignore. It might be good or bad. Yeah, well, that's in there, that's good. Okay, so we have this README. We're supposed to make it just from create React app. I want my icons in my source folder. Everything that pertains to my app, I want in the source folder. That's kind of like my folder is the source folder. Everything else that's already out there is automatic stuff that is not custom. Anything custom goes in the source folder. So I have this default app here. I'm going to copy and paste this class-based component in here. You can follow along the curriculum. We have a class. I'll go over the right syntax for having state in a functional component. Again, you only want state in one component. So if you're going to do it with a class-based, function-based, that's fine, but you're not going to do both in one app. You can use both, but not with state. State is in one component. So we have a state is muted false. Everything else looks the same. I'm going to open up a console so I can see my console logs. And what's next? We make a function called toggle mute that sets the state.
Sorry, what is this app supposed to do?
It's supposed to have a mute button that when you click on it, it switches from muted to non-muted, and it just toggles it. So we have a state is muted, and if we toggle the mute, we'll just set is muted to the opposite of whatever it currently is. So it starts out at false, And oh, look, we have a console log here. So we can see what this dot state is. So I'll refresh. Oh, I refreshed. So we have a test button. It looks like that functionality is already written with the sets with the toggle method.
Can you walk through that? I don't get it.
On click here, we have this dot toggle mute, and this dot toggle mute will refer back to this function here that we wrote. And you're going to want to use the fat arrow function if you're going to refer to it down here.
Why?
Because let's say I don't. I use this. It says cannot read property set state of undefined. So this dot set state cannot read set state of this. This is undefined. If we want this to be defined, we'd have to write this, which is really annoying. And
so you don't have to bind it to use a fat arrow?
Yes, fat arrow lets us escape the bind.
So even though toggle mute is in class app, you still have to bind.
Yeah, I'm not a computer science whiz, but the way I think of it is when you use a fat arrow function, this is wherever you define the function. If you use a normal function, this is wherever it was called.
Yes. So
This,
toggle, go ahead.
This, whatever is this inside of toggle mute, if you use a fat arrow, it'll always remember this class app that it's inside. But if you write it the normal way, wherever you call it, it'll be like, where am I? That's what this is.
Yeah.
And so we can get rid of this. What's next? We saw state changing every time. It's nice that, oh,
19.
where's my mic on? Thanks. So let's move on. Oh yeah, like I was saying, it's nice to see state here. You can console log state. I'm not sure, I'm still new with the functional methods, but the way they define state in a function, it's kind of very different from the state object that we have here. And it's nice to be able to console log it, just saying. I'm sure there's drawbacks too though. When I was working with, or helping Bobby just now, he had like something in state that was kind of a nested object. He kind of had another object, you know, some key. And inside it, there was an array. And this is totally fine. I mean, and then he had like a counter. And it was an object. So this is totally fine. If your app gets really complicated, you're gonna wanna organize it into separate keys and nest it. But if you want to change it all of a sudden inside this set state, because state is an object, what is this popping up? Gosh, that's annoying. I have to turn that off. Oh, okay. So if I wanted to access counter, I'd have to actually go some key is equal to, gosh, like it's really complicated. It would be this dot state dot some key and the first object, and then I would access that key of counter, and I would say +1. And you can see how much harder that was then. So you want to keep the state, if you're going to use the class, like really simple. No nested things, like as least as you can. Yeah?
Doing that just change the counter way down in there, or would it change some key to just the value that was there? They solved it.
It'll,
Second.
yeah, second. It'll replace it. I'm setting the state. So the state is this magical React thing. And the state is, when you change a state, your app just does all the work for you. And it'll update according to whatever you change the state to.
If you wanted it to end up on like go back real quick. Like so right now on line 7, we have some key is equal to an array that has an object in it.
Mm-hmm.
But on line 13, we're actually resetting the sum key to just a number.
Oh no, did I do that?
Yeah.
So I would
if you
even
wanted
have to
keep
be
the
like,
same, yeah, like what would you want to do if you wanted to keep the same
oh my
syntax?
goodness. See, it's even worse than I thought. Okay. So I would have to encapsulate this whole thing in an array.
Yep.
And I would say,
And then wrap it in an object.
yes.
Right on,
And
then
it would be,
there you go. Now,
yay!
yeah. So now we've preserved. So now we can always. Now we've preserved the structure of that variable. Does that make sense to everybody? Like, so we just have to be aware when we're changing state, like what exactly we're changing and how we're. It would work. It would still work, but we would. Now, like, we're setting it up one way, and then we're resetting it a different way, and that's going to create confusion, right?
So your state object should have as few nests as possible. Maybe one level. This is nested 1, 2, 3 levels.
This makes kind of sense to me, like when I did it, and like I can see like the array. Well, now I can see the array, and inside the array there's an object, and then like so.
It looks simple up here, but
Yes.
down here it's not. So I'm going to delete those, and we're going to create mute button, a separate component. And you already did this earlier, so we're going to want to organize it and make a components folder inside of source. And we're going to have a folder that has the same name as the component. And that's because you're going to want multiple files inside the folder. You're going to want the tests for that component also in that folder, as well as things that pertain just to that component. Here in mutebutton.js, I'm going to just copy and paste this mute button. And it looks like it has this stuff props. This is a class format. So we have a render in between inside the class, but before the render, you can declare functions, and you'll do it in a certain syntax that's different from vanilla. You don't have to say like function this. You just say my function. You get rid of that right there, and you write it like that up there. And then inside the render, you kind of have a free-for-all JavaScript session here in between the render and the return. You can do anything you want with JavaScript and do all your calculations. And then in the return, you have your HTML. You can have multiple returns conditionally. Once you hit the first return, that's it. It exits. So what did this do? Where are we? Looks like we're the same. Oh, I didn't even change it. I didn't even import it in app. Let's see. So we have mute button here, and we gave it a prop. And we talked about props before. That's how a component knows that it needs to update. So if this changes, it will re-render. This .state is muted.
If state is changed, it'll be
Yeah, state is that magical thing. When it changes, our website changes. Uh-oh, what happened?
you go back and
I didn't import it, okay. Hmm. It's not a capital?
Your file is mute and then the button is lowercase, whereas when you import it,
Capital B.
This right here, oh my goodness.
second one.
Thanks. Uh-oh. Do I have to restart the server?
Wait,
Well-
you showed them your app. Go
What
back.
error is it giving?
It's giving the same error. It thinks it's lowercase.
Go back to your app.js. Yeah.
I'm just gonna, do you see this error here? Yeah,
all those
my server is kind of stuck on this error.
static.
Why is it so slow? It was slow the first time. Okay, so our click is broken. Why? Rather than actually look. Oh, okay. So this is muted, is there, but the click, the on click, where's the on click? There's no on click. So if we want to pass the on click, we can pass a function as a prop. Did we do this with the count clicker? Is this new? You did it with the count clicker? Okay, I won't dwell on it. We added this .props.toggle mute. And here, it doesn't have a prop of toggle mute. I don't think I need to copy this one. Oh, it's not this .state. What is it? Okay. Now, the syntax is going to be a little different with the functional components, and it's going to get kind of confusing. I would just stick with one. It's hard for me to keep track of both, really. Okay. So, mute button and toggle mute, does it work? Yay. Okay, now it says on and off, but I want pictures because they gave me pictures up in this icons folder. Oh. Okay. Oh, they're SVGs. So SVGs are nice. If you want to make like a mobile app or something where space is limited, this is a very small file, and it can be infinitely big. So if you have it's a vector graphic. It's something vector graphic. And what is it? Sector vector graphic. So yeah. You can have it infinitely big, and the line will be infinitely small. Like it'll be, if you have a curve, you just, yeah.
They render faster too.
Yes, SVG. We want more.
20.
Uh-huh.
Why it's a function, right? On toggle mute for this toggle mute. Why
Yes.
why are you passing it in like that and not with the parentheses at the end?
Why am I not passing it? Can anybody tell me?
So when you pass it in with the parentheses, it's given its return value.
It's giving its
So,
return value.
If you pass that in, so what's that, click, or at the top of you, if that doesn't have a value, it's like that'll be like undefined or not the actual thing. And then once you run, like it'll automatically run when that hits that line. Well,
It'll run every time it renders.
right. And so we don't want
Every time it renders, this will be invoked. So we only want that to happen for certain cases, not this one. Very, very rarely will we want that to happen. Okay. Now let's put the image in here. So we go to mutebutton.js, and before, this is a little confusing, like just because it makes the line longer, and before the lesson didn't have these alt tags, but React started yelling at me in the console. Like I was doing this lesson earlier, and if I don't have these alt tags, you have this error here, with this warning: images must have an alt prop, and that's for accessibility. So we always want those. This is the image source equals, and that is telling it the path, the file path of the image. And does it work? And that's it. That's the whole assignment.
I notice we keep hard coding the file path in the import. Does JavaScript, I mean, it's going to be a dumb question, have like the equivalent of OS, you know, like in Python, where we can find relative location?
It's that I really wish like you could dynamically. So it's gonna load everything at first. It's gonna load all those images, and you can't you can dynamically require the images, but it'll still load everyone regardless of whether you actually end up using it or not.
Correct. Yeah.
So, where did you put the off icon?
The off icon was given in the repository, and I dragged it into my project folder and then into the source folder, and it is now within the source folder.
You dragged the whole folder in there?
Yes, it used to be out there somewhere, and I just dragged it in here because I want everything custom in source.
Can you go into one of the icon files real quick?
Icon file?
So I noticed in here, it doesn't ever explicitly give this image a value, or a variable name or anything.
Yeah, yeah, no.
So when you import it, it automatically just knows that because it's an SVG file.
Yeah, there was some automatically happening stuff.
Even
So
Yeah,
is
thank
it
you.
a calculus?
This has nothing to do with JavaScript here.
No, I know that, but because, I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm just used to it. Just having a variable name.
There's some.
The variable name just, it looks like all it is just the name of the file.
It's probably the magic is happening here. The image, when it's given a source of an SVG file, it will recognize it and process it.
But if you, I mean, I guess you couldn't do this, but if you had two images in the SVG file.
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You can't have two JPEGs in the same file.
Changing these manually is a little more complicated than you think. I could just paste it in here, but I don't think that would do any good.
Now, can you explain? I don't get why you have two returns.
Okay, so we don't actually have two returns. We have a conditional statement, and if it hits this, if is muted is true, then we'll return this we'll hit this return here. This return method will return, and that will return us out completely, and we'll never hit this line here. We'll never hit line 12. And if this is false, then we will hit line 12, and we'll hit this return. With the deconstruction thing, I want you to use a specific syntax. I don't want you doing it when you use a functional component in the parameters. I would rather you actually refer to props so you remember that it is a prop. And so where do you go if you want like a pure JavaScript instance that you can play with? No? I usually go to I usually have a browser open. It's a bad habit because this is a global object in Node. It's very clean. This, in the console, even though the console has some bells and whistles and autocomplete and stuff, it has a lot of stuff in there already, which can possibly mess with what you're typing. So,
Is there an
embed?
Debugger?
Debugger, yep. Yeah, you can do that in the browser too. So the deconstruction that we talked about, it's actually a very simple concept. So I have my object. Oh. So we have my object, and it equals this is a simple JavaScript object. And we can see that right now we have these variables that we want to define, but they aren't defined. It just, I think it's happening all the time, but it's displaying here for some reason. So if we want to define these, we can say const, we can say var, we can say let. It doesn't matter, just depending on what you need. Const is a good place to start because if it's not supposed to change, just write it as const. And later on, if you have to change it to a let, it'll let you know.
Did you open?
What did I open?
Yeah, it looks like you have that already.
Oh, I just pasted that in there. I just pasted up here. Let my object equals this. And so if we say const curly brackets, let's say I want the city, I want the school, I want number of students, but I don't want something we don't need. And it equals my object. Now, I have these variables declared. I can even tab complete them. I don't think I can tab complete this because it doesn't exist.
So that's deconstruction. Right?
Uh-huh.
What you just did. And so when you, at first, you initially declared the object, right? So you said let.
Mm-hmm. The object is, yeah, I had to declare it first.
Right. So when you go and do that again, city council number of students equals my object,
Mm-hmm.
are you declaring like, okay, let's overwrite my object and
No, I didn't change my object at all. I just read it.
you just read it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so now city, school, and number of students all for like equal the corresponding value of my
It's like a long-handed way of writing this.
right, okay, yeah. My object that.
Could you use the spread operator instead of city, school, number of students?
the spread operator?
Yeah, where you spread all the.
Possibly. And then just do all of them, maybe? I don't know. Maybe.
So this is a little thing I'm confused about. If you have an object of multiple things, you have an array of things, right? And you don't specify variable names for each.
Yeah, that I don't know. An array?
Yeah, like I'm saying.
You can play with the syntax, and I would tell you to do it in Node, and just play with things and see what works. Look on Stack Overflow, and see if you can do it with an array. This is useful for us only as an object because this .props is an object. And if we use that syntax, not here. It won't work here. Remember, my little free JavaScript session is inside the render. And with the functional components, this area here, and this area here kind of get lumped together. And then you have your return as a separate area.
Wait, can you repeat that? You're saying we should put the state above render or below?
Below render, above render, we define functions that we pull in. Below render, we can just freehand JavaScript.
As far as the state.
State?
Yeah, as far as the state.
State gets
Well, up
defined
there,
up
right?
here.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying.
Yeah. State gets defined up here. State is, yeah, I guess it would be a class variable there. Yeah, I think so. So const is muted, and toggle mute. If we say that, we can just this.props and command D, and it used to be that you had 100 of these that you had typed, and you can have a much nicer syntax to read. I think that's it. Oh, does it work? Still works. Oh, that's not it. Okay, so I wanted to show you. So I wrote them as functions as well. Let me make it a little smaller. Okay, so this is the mute button class. And let me just switch to functions. So we saw this wouldn't work. This wouldn't work. And you can see the syntax highlighting is even all wrong. The syntax in this section here between class and render is different from the syntax inside of the render, which is also different than inside the return. In the return, JavaScript is in the squigglies. The return also has to be one element. So if you have two elements, you have to wrap them in a div, or else it'll blow up. And that's true for classes or functions. So let me switch it to, there's a lot of similarities between them, but I'm gonna focus on the differences. So we have the function app here, and this is the top level component. So it is the component that has state. We use a different syntax here. We don't import component from React. We import this method use state. This is not a component in the sense that we are importing it from React. It's a function, and we can set state this way. It looks like each different state variable will have a different and I think you can call this whatever you want, but it's just less confusing, just say set whatever the variable is and the variable name here. This is declaring kind of a value and a function to modify it. You use this to give it the initial value.
So it's basically destructuring too, right? So use states a function returning a value and a callback function that could change the value.
Yes. So when we want to change it inside of mute button, oops. This is how props gets passed in, and this is why I want you to use this syntax. Instead of putting it in here where you have, remember you had the, you can do it this way. It's pretty if you only have a few. I want you to do it this way so you know that they're props. You're still learning about props. Oops. So this does the same thing. It makes it all pretty. We don't have to say this dot props here, but you know that it's coming from the props. And this looks pretty similar. The nice thing about the function is we have mashed together the area between class and render and return. And we just have a free-for-all JavaScript session in here before the return. The syntax is a little different because we're not using class methods and class functions or whatever. We have to declare const toggle mute. This will not work anymore. It's not a class. It's a function, and this is how the syntax should be.
But you also don't have to refer to anything as this if you're using this functional way, correct?
Yes, you got rid of this.
You have a function app and a class.
The function.
Another class component like mute button being a class component.
Oh.
Or I mean,
Yeah.
I would have a class app and then a mute button.
functional.
The way that people are doing it now, or people were doing it 3 months ago, was they would have their top level component be a class, and that holds state. And functions, in a React developer's mind right now, a functional component and a stateless component are the same thing.
When would I use a class level component versus a state?
When
like a functional.
I would, I'd say you should be comfortable with both, because when you go out in the workforce, it's going to be classes that you're dealing with in the code bases of whatever company you go to. If you're writing a new project, personal project, go with the newer thing and use functions, because as you can see, functions can now have state. This is new.
Sorry, that didn't answer my question. I
Oh.
have no idea when to use class or function-based components.
When to use them? I'd say experiment with it. I'm not too sure myself.
So whenever you just want to render text and not change anything, just use a functional component. So it's just text. I'm just rendering something else on the screen. If I need to change state or use lifecycle methods, which we'll teach on Tuesday, then do that. Do class based. Generally speaking, Mike is right. You only have one class that's usually at the very, very top, and everything underneath that is a functional component. It's kind of like using the house example. If you're running finances, the parents of the parents keep track of all the state of all the finances, and the kids underneath just worry about, I got my money, now I can do stuff with it.
Does anybody need any clarification on anything?
You know, get back to the code for the class base.
Class space. I think the only way I can do that is
What did you have to find props? You said you wanted us to do a specific way. That's what I wanted to see.
Oh, props. Well, I
Yeah.
didn't pass any props down to this grandparent level component.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So because it extends React component, it just knows that it has props. It's given props when it's born or rendered, and this.
Could you do the new button as a functional component with the tab as a class component?
Sure. I don't think that'll change anything at all. Oops. This is conventionally how they have it now. Because the mute button has no state. And so they're interchangeable. You can have both. Your state is only going to live in one.
Yeah, you're only
So
always gonna have
choose carefully.
So if it, so the W8D4 we started messing around before they asked questions, and he had state available, but that was still a functional.
You can, so generally speaking, it's if you are just rendering text, use a functional based component.
Yep.
You can have state in a functional based component, but you also, at that point, you're losing the ability to use lifecycle methods. So think about like if you were to go on Instagram.com and visit somebody's website, and you go down to the very bottom, for a split second, there's going to be 3 new boxes that are gray. There's different life cycles of when the component gets onto your screen. So beforehand, it's just 3 gray boxes. And then while you're still scrolling down the page, it's like that's before the component mounts onto the screen. We'll talk about that in just a second.
Yeah.
Basically, once you have functional-based components and you use state, you're probably going to use lifecycle methods. And once you use lifecycle methods, you have to go back to the class.
Okay.
So your functional-based components can do state, but you generally shouldn't do state.
Yeah, it's complicated. They're rewriting this whole new thing for functional components, and they're not called lifecycle methods, but they are similar, and it's a completely different
Probably more efficient.
thing. Yeah, it's newer.
So you don't have to
Predefined method.
Can I see mute button again?
Mute button. And all of this code is on the repository on the lesson for today.
Question?
Oh, we have. Oh, yeah.
I just thought it, sorry. So say we had multiple functions here. I see export default mute button. He was going over how to export multitude.
Oh,
So I was wondering the syntax on that exactly.
you wouldn't do it so much here.
I mean, I could just like make it modular, make different files, and export default each one. I was wondering if I had multiple in one.
I think so. If you say like, yeah, I'd say
It's an export and then curly.
I need to get rid of these. Ah.
You could just
You can get rid of those last 3 lines, Mike.
Last 3 lines.
Yeah, so you're only supposed to have line 18.
Oh, okay. You want to do it? Okay. I think.
There's actually only one export on each page, so it's gonna
Really?
be export, yeah. And then export, and then get rid of default.
Hmm.
And then surround mute button with curlies.
you could just like
And then commas.
Yeah, and then if you have another function that you want to export, go ahead.
okay, so it's comma space. I was wondering if I had to like
Nope, it's comma space.
Okay. Yeah.
No, if you do export default, it's exported the entire file. So the way that JavaScript works is you write your file and you have to export it at the bottom in order for it to be used in other places. So if you don't have the export at the bottom, it's not able to be used in other places. So once you do export default view button, you're doing the entire file.
And I remember within the JavaScript, we also had export, and I forgot the dot method attached to the function, and you can export it explicitly.
Yep.
That's something I have to look up when I get to. I don't remember the syntax for those things. Anything else? Challenges. We have whack-a-mole. We have whack-a-mole, Madlib, and Hangman.
And it's Hangman. That's what I was wondering. Is that the hardware rule something?
Oh. So whack-a-mole.
Yes.
Super Bowl.
I think, yeah, whack-a-mole and Madlib are already stubbed out. There's a repository that you go into. You're going to go into it whenever you download someone else's React project. They will have put node modules in their git ignore. So you won't have your node modules. So you cd into that project and say npm install. And npm install will look at the package.json, which is kind of like your requirements text in Django. And it'll install everything in the node modules, and then you can npm start. Okay. Does everyone feel good? I got a good feeling yesterday from you guys. you were excited about React.
All right, let's work in pairs today. We'll get all this done.